Hello, it is with absolute pleasure that I welcome Vineet Agrawal, the MD and CEO of Wipro Consumer Care Lighting. Vineet, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me here, Krishna.
Absolutely. The big news, of course, has been the fact that Santoor is the largest soap brand in the country, and we thought we must spend some time to understand what you got right with a brand that was launched about 40 years ago, if I may say so.
Yes.
Would you like to just identify key turning points for us, Vineet, through this journey that seems quite incredible, if I may say so?
So, the start of Santoor is itself a story by itself because um, we had started with a soap brand called Bubbles, which got into some trademark issues. And the head of the business that time put up a toilet soap plant. The soap plant was already put. So people used to normally have a soap plant after, the proof of concept, but he put up a soap plant. And once that got into a trademark issue, we had nothing to do, right? And you had investment made. So something had to be done. And therefore one of the ideas which came on was a sandal and turmeric soap, and Santoor was born. So it was out of necessity, almost out of necessity at that point of time, that this came about. So I think that was the first turning point. And when we test marketed, the interesting part was we did it in Bangalore and flopped. But the conviction was so high that we launched it all India. With some corrections. So I think start was interesting, and then we sort of plateaued. We made a foothold, but nothing, no major impact of foothold. And then that's the time where the whole idea of mistaken age came in, which is that the woman wants to be looking younger than what her age is, especially married women, and therefore that was a story which caught on. There were other ads or the other positioning that we looked at, but this came out very, very strong. And I think that was a good start. And once we started that on in a year, I think we doubled our sales. And then there was no looking back. Uh, a third one which came in was when we plateaued after some time in 2003, 2004, we sort of plateaued the Santoor sales. Sorry, first we plateaued again in about 93, 94. We plateaued Santoor sales. And that's the time a huge amount of research was done, consumer research was done. And what we identified was we were making some small, small mistakes. Um, and and they looked very small, very easy to fix, but they were having a problem, which was that, this girl was a beautiful girl, but she didn't have any other talent. Okay. Second was that she was getting recognized by older women, saying that she looks very beautiful and she wants appreciation from young to young. And third is that she was praising herself, saying that "Meri twacha se meri umr ka pata nahi chalta." I mean, somebody else can say that, right? It's better than somebody else says it. We fixed that, and when we came up with that ad, again nothing happened. And that's the time we did the regionalization strategy, saying that you can't you can't quench your thirst by taking Ganga Jal, 2 drops of Ganga Jal. If you want to drink water, then you drink the full glass of water. And if you have limited people, then you can only give limited water to a limited few, but you quench their thirst and let the others be thirsty to that extent. So that's what we did. We took our 5 states and said we'd focus on these 5 states, but we'll put so much of money in these 5 states that we saturated and others we'll neglect. And fortunately, that worked for us in about 95, 96, 97. Uh, so that was the third turning point where I think a lot of it was to do with regionalization, which really happened. And the fourth turning point was when I think uh, levers decided this whole power brand strategy. And in the power brand strategy, Rexona lost out in soaps and they started christening it as Lux Rexona. They did it for about 6, 8 months and then they corrected it. But that gave us an opportunity to really, really get a foothold in AP. Because a lot of consumers who were Rexona users. Rexona was a leader in AP. It had something like 27, 28% share. And they were leaders in AP. And suddenly your leader starts experimenting, creates an issue. So I think those are the 4 or 5 things which were really turning points for us. The other interesting one which happened was that once we became leader in a state, like 2 states, we didn't know how to behave. We knew how to behave like a challenger, but we didn't know how to behave like a leader.
That's right.
And that's the whole concept, saying that we will paint the whole city orange. That we will dominate a city, have posters, banners, shop fronts, wall paintings, dealer boards, everything orange, and you make the city orange. Was the other execution point, which is finally in FMCG, it's all about execution. So I think that we did right.
Vineet, it must be said that when you take on someone like a Levers and they're deep pocketed, and with all respect to you, it was not such a small brand, not such a large brand, rather, when you really decided to take them on. How do you deal with that situation where the ambition is there and still there's kind of a situation where you have limited resources?
So first is that you go on trying.
Okay.
And because you have limited resources, that's why this whole concept of regionalization came in. Had we had a lot of money, we would have said, okay, we'll spend all the money nationally. And it was born out of necessity. And that became a mantra, not only in India, but outside of India, wherever we have tried to take on brands, saying that you dominate what you can. So that's one. Second, I think I had a great team actually. I think in one of our offsites way back in 2005, we said, what should be a newspaper headline that you guys want to see in about 8, 10 years later, or maybe 5 years later. And at that time, Lux was number one brand. And one team came back and says Santoor beats Lux. And we all ourselves laughed at it, saying that, we were some 150, 160 crore brand, saying that what will we be taking on Lux at that point of time? But I think the belief was strong. We were seeing some amount of success in certain places. And, once you start seeing success in some place, and not at state level, but more like district levels. That gives you confidence it will work. Uh, so I think the belief of the team and conviction of the team really drove this. So I would say I don't take credit for that headline, but I just take credit for the fact that I said, okay, looks a good idea. Let me back it. Is the only credit I can take. But I think the team was great, and I think we also been lucky. That's it.
Vineet, I'm also thinking that in a scenario where resources were limited, it also allowed you to think out of the box and be very nimble-footed. Is my assessment right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think this is an industry that being nimble-footed is critical, and think out of box is absolutely critical.
I'm just thinking, competition like Levers, for example, they have a larger portfolio. And point is, your first hurdle, if you may say so, was to get past Lux. But again, you had to deal with them in terms of deeper pockets, distribution, and of course, portfolio across categories in that sense. How did you manage to do that with a portfolio that's obviously much smaller than what Levers had or continues to have, Vineet?
So I think first is when you're large, you also have a disadvantage. I think you have a disadvantage because I'm not large, so I can't say that. But you also have a disadvantage fact that you have multiple pulls and pushes because you have multiple brands which are vying for the same amount of attention. While we were focused at that point of time only on Santoor, we said, nothing else. Let's first make Santoor before we try anything else. So the focus of that organization, at least Indian organization, was only on Santoor. So I think that sort of helped. Indian consumer business, the lighting business was doing its own portfolio management, but or Yardley was doing its own portfolio management. But Santoor, this team, which was a consumer India team, was focused on Santoor. They had Vanaspati, which was relatively smaller. There are other small brands which were smaller, but it was like do or die for Santoor. So I think that sort of helped us.
Vineet, in your opinion, from a numbers point of view, which was the first big hurdle? Was it to get past 200 crores or 300 if you can, pick out some key milestones? And then, of course, the Lux part came much later and you're close to 3,000 crores today. But fundamentally, if you look at the key turning points in terms of numbers, what do
So
those
I
do?
would say that once we became number one in AP, that time AP and Telangana was combined, which I think if it happened in about 2007, was the first uh, turn we took. I wouldn't call it. So we were not measuring ourselves as to what turnover happens. We were measuring ourselves more by the fact that we become number one there.
That's right.
And then I think in 2012, we became number one in Karnataka. And then 2014, 15, we became number one in Maharashtra, and then a couple of years later in Gujarat. So I think conquering it state by state was giving us the confidence that we can go ahead. So that was the thought behind it. I won't call it saying that when we reached 500 crores or 1,000 crores, that was a right turning point. When we became leaders in one state, that gave confidence to other states, saying that yes, if we can become leaders in one state. And in AP, there was a time when we were three times larger than the next brand. So that gap was so high that it was not like, they were 18%, we were 19%. So the gap was so high that we could go back and saying that if the gap can become so high, why can't you guys beat competition in your own state? So I think that uh, uh, the playbook of how we won in AP was followed by other states.
Which markets, if you can pick out a few, we need to tell us what really have turned to be the tougher markets in that sense. I mean, you spoke of AP, you spoke of Karnataka, but is there something that stands out in terms of difficulty in any of these markets?
So these four were obviously the success ones.
That's right.
Amongst the focus one that we took on initially was also Kerala and also Orissa. Uh, and they didn't respond as well. And therefore, we dropped them from the focus market states. So Gujarat was not the first. So it was Maharashtra, Karnataka, AP, Orissa, and Kerala as the first five states. When we had to drop, we were not seeing good response from Kerala as well as Orissa. We dropped them and added on Gujarat from that perspective. So while on ground we felt that there was excitement about the brand, but it was not turning into numbers.
I'm just thinking, you of course moved Santoor to us. I mean, the kind of it's synonymous with sandalwood and continues to be so. But then you decide to move it to hand wash, look at other categories. If you can just throw some light on the consumer insight that came in that led to eventually getting into these categories, Vineet.
So, uh, so I didn't want to get into hand wash, frankly. Okay. Again, by accident, we wanted to do it. So we were wanting to launch Santoor in Middle East. And when they went to Middle East, our team went to Middle East, they said, we need to support it and hand wash is a good criterion, etc. And I was saying, I'm not sure whether you want to make Santoor a hand wash soap because, you know, uh, it's a skincare soap and, is it right to make it a hand wash soap? I mean, hand wash is more related to toilet and all that, etc. But I said, okay, you can experiment in Middle East. But the way the product, these guys built the product and the way the packaging got, so we got floored. I said, this is, I think, going to work. And but we said with the positioning would be soft hands, perfume and soft hands, right? But that is your positioning of soaps. So we didn't go to antibacterial. And today, Santoor hand wash is the second largest brand in hand wash after Dettol. So, in spite of the fact that it is not antibacterial as a positioning, but uh, but the fact it's soft hands and also it is great perfume is taken us there. So it's a quiet movement. We have not talked too much about it, but that sort of helps you because the consumers now see more of Santoor in their houses than just soap.
But there's also headroom for growth because these are still underpenetrated categories, if I may say so.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, is there something you have in mind? Are there other categories that looked interesting at some point, which you did take a look at and eventually had to change your mind about getting into, Vineet?
We did get into other categories and then we pulled out. So we got into, let's say, talcum powder, which is very small now.
That's right.
We got into deos, which we had to pull out totally under Santoor. We got into lotions, which is there, but is relatively small. So we have experimented and we got into skin creams, which again did not work. So as I said, you have to just continue to try, go on trying and see what works. As long as your positioning remains and your core of the brand doesn't change, I think you can still go on trying. But the consumers may not accept everything that you think should get accepted, and you have to respect what the consumer says.
Vineet, is there anything you can share with us in terms of key learnings from both successes and failures?
Um, So I think one is in FMCG, execution is just the focus. So I think everybody has great strategy. Everybody has similar strategies, not too much difference, but persistence and focus and this execution becomes so critical. Second, I think is uh, the role of the retailer uh, was critical in the initial phases of Santoor, because at that time, uh, I mean, how do you convince the consumer to buy your soap if you can't have don't have money for advertising? And what we use is the retailer saying that, why don't you recommend Santoor to your consumer? And even if the consumer doesn't like it, we'll take back even a used soap. But please recommend it. And you suddenly have 8-10 lakhs of retailers who are pushing your product for trials, because trials is key, because the product is good. And I mean, how does the consumer know the product is good? That's become a little bit more difficult now. Earlier, we could do it much more. Now you can still do it in smaller towns and rural. The metro towns don't, the retailers don't want to push your product or recommend your product. But, I think that was a key learning, that the intermediary there is such a huge influencer for the consumer, because you don't touch the consumer finally. You don't meet the consumer when she is buying. That's a second thing. And third, I think, this whole issue of dominance comes from, um, this Second World War story, which is that German a general called Rommel. He was supposed to be a brilliant general, and he was uh, he was routing the allies, and he came down from Italy and the whole of North Africa. He was beating allies everywhere, and he was progressing towards Suez Canal. And everybody knew that if he captured Suez Canal, that war will come to a quick end, because Suez Canal was critical. And then there was this American general called Montgomery. He was sent there, and he said, "I will not fight him till I have troops which are 3 times larger than he has." So he stayed in a place called El Alamein, and he built his troops up to a level which was so high that he routed Rommel there, and then Rommel never came back. Uh, so, uh, so the whole issue is that the power of dominance, um, even if it's a little delayed, just helps you. And that's a learning that I had, to say that if I have to succeed in Santoor, whichever battle I fight, I have to be dominant in that battle. And then you stay on course, and it's not going to happen in 1 month. It's not going to happen in 2 months. It's going to take it 12 months, 18 months. There were times in Karnataka where we felt that, why is the market share not moving? And suddenly it moved after about 15 months, it started moving. So you have to be at it and have the patience to be at it.
Reet, one final question. The communication strategy has been an integral part of Santoor's success, but there's one thing I must ask you. How has that communication stood the test of time? We live in a different world, the audiences change, aspirations have changed, but the bit of the mummy connection remains integral to the brand.
So interestingly, I think a lot of credit for the consistency of it also goes to the advertising agency. That time FCB Ulka was the advertising agency, and the head of that business was Anil Kapoor, and he was clear that he's not going to change anything. And so there were times when we got frustrated, saying that, brand is not moving. The that so how is it for last 10 years that baby has not grown up? She's still the 6, 7 year old baby. Shouldn't she grow up? And then we made an ad which was the sisters ad, that, the two girls going, and somebody says, "Are you sisters?" And she says, "No, she's my mummy," because the girl has grown up to 18, 19-year-old girl. And that didn't work. And then we quickly pulled back, saying that, that let's not experiment, don't do stupid things, go back something which is age old. The fact that, the woman wants to look younger, don't experiment with that. It's a solid insight. Uh, every country, every place in the world, that's what works. What you need to do is refresh in terms of aspirations of women. So earlier, for example, a girl was just a nice looking girl in a marriage sequence.
Absolutely.
Then we made her do aerobics. She started playing a flute. Then she became the friend of the daughter. So, our mothers were never friends. They would say, you've padhai achhi karo, you play well, etc., etc., etc. But they didn't play with us, or they didn't help us with our studies. But then the woman started helping the child. So then there were series of ads which we made, that she's playing hula hoop for her, or teaching hula hoop, or teaching cricket to the child, etc., etc. And then she started working, uh, and so she first worked from home, and then she started working in offices, uh, and then we took her to the fact that how do you bring in glamour? Till that time, we was so we couldn't uh, get uh, get film stars, women film stars. So we said we'll get a male film star who recognizes her uh, as a young girl and realizes later that she's actually has a child, and therefore we brought in the glamour with the film star. So remained contemporary. I think we remained contemporary and understood the aspirations of the changing woman. So, or the changing aspirations of women. I think that's what we understood well. And that is one part which we consistently maintain as to how do we ensure that we are understanding the aspirations or the changing aspirations of women.
This has been an incredible success story. Many thanks, Vineet. This
Thank you,
is
Krishna.
I can't imagine a brand becoming as large as this in 4 decades. It's almost inconceivable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would also again say that we've been lucky at times, and the moves we made just paid off. So we're just lucky.
Thank you, Vineet.
Thank you. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.